I've shared with you over the past month that I'm fascinated by how many words speak to the unfolding of our spiritual enlightenment that start with the letter I. There's just no coincidence. Of course, I don't believe in coincidences at all, so there certainly is no coincidence that the great I am, the source and substance of us all, is portrayed at its very best through words that, at least in the English language, begin with the letter I. So though I've selected 4, there are many others that you'll think of and which you've heard me refer to over this past month. We've talked about immortality. We've talked about inspiration. We've talked about insight. We've talked about intuition. So today, the theme, the I's have it, is topped off with the topic individuality. Rather fitting, don't you think, for the 4th of July holiday. And as you know, my intuition guided me to do this series of talks on the I's have it as a result of a request from one of our members to talk about immortality. So that's what we started with, because that really is the beginning and the allness of who and what we are anyway. There's such a long list of inspiring and illuminating words that speak to the development and the support of our spiritual selves. Beginning with the great I am, God, divine spirit, creative intelligence, we find such uplifting words and ideas as imagination, idealism, illumination, ingenuity, words that speak to our sense of integrity and inner self. And those are all words that I haven't used before in this series. So let's talk about individuality. Remember, I've been quoting Ernest Holmes this past month. We understand the infinite only to the degree that it expresses itself through us. It becomes to us that which we believe it to be. That is how each of us expresses our individuality. So I'd like to ask you this week to consider that as you go through the week. How is the infinite expressing through you as your individual self? Most of us find that much easier to believe about ourselves, of course, than we do about the kid down the street with the baggy pants, or the lady next door with the orange hair, or the county councilman or man or woman who sleeps through council meetings. But the truth of the matter is that self-expression is limitless, because God's limitless. Each of us has our own individualized idea of what God is. And it looks a lot like our experience about what our experience permits it to be. Which is why sometimes, for some of us, we find it necessary to change that experience from what it once was to what we would like it to be now, so that we express ourselves differently as a result. Ernest Holmes was right on the money when he said, we understand the infinite only to the degree that it expresses itself through us. It's not that God limits itself to what we are. It's that sometimes we limit God by our own ideas of its existence and its role in the human experience. So for those of us who live in the new world, as it was once called, our heritage proclaims our individuality. Many of us who live in the Western Hemisphere have our origins rooted in Europe, while others have Asian, African, Indian, Native American, or Polynesian origins. But as we look at recorded history, almost everyone who lives in North or South America came here from somewhere else. And I believe that speaks to the fact that our ancestors proclaimed their individuality and became the pioneers who settled and grew the civilizations of the Western Hemisphere. That was a demonstration of individuality. Just as the immigration north and east from Polynesia and west in the early years of the mainland was a demonstration of individuality. And I believe that continues in the world today. Demonstrations of individuality, but they play out somewhat differently than they used to. And don't you know, many of us have as much of a challenge accepting the individuality of younger generations today as our ancestors had, accepting the individuality of friends and family who sailed off to a new world or climbed into a Conestoga wagon to roll westward. How could God possibly show up with purple and green hair? Or a gemstone in the navel? And what on earth is rock Christian music anyway? Why, I've even heard that some people today even believe that there are other ways of recovering from illness or injury besides surgery, pills, and therapy. Sure is different than what I was taught when I grew up. I've been rereading this little book. Actually, I have two of them. It's the same book. Original edition, updated edition. They read exactly the same way, but gee whiz, one of them has a beautiful purple cover on it. This thing called You. We're studying this in our Practitioner 1 class. So it's been an opportunity for me to revisit Holmes' words in this thing called You. And let me tell you, that's a little book, but it's mighty. In it, Dr. Holmes reminds us that every individual is seeking the joy of living, to be needed, to be loved, to be included in the great drama of life. It's impossible to escape the creative urge which everything in nature is endowed with. And the evolution of humankind and of our planet is proof of this irresistible urge, which pushes us onward and forward. It's like this planet, this great good earth, this human experience is our laboratory, our experimental ground, if you will. Life has entered into us, and with it, this irresistible urge to create. We're all some part of a universal order. We're joined and united at the highest level, which is our Creator. Yet each one of us is different from any other one. We're individualized. Every person is a doorway, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, through which the infinite passes into the finite, through which God becomes human, through which the universal becomes individual. Every one of us is a doorway through which the infinite passes into the finite. This is the pattern of your being. This is the real spirit of you. And it's as eternal as God is. It's as indestructible as reality. And it's as changeless as truth. It's also what makes evolution evolve. We're driven to create, and we have individual ways and means of doing that. That helps me make a lot of sense out of the idea that I am the product of all my experiences. and all the people who have come into my life. The universal flows through me, and I individuate or individualize it. And out of that comes something new, something different, something better. Remember Jesus' words, "Behold, I make all things new." See how they apply here? That through our intuition, our inspiration, our ideas, our ingenuity, our imagination, our intellect, our intention, our individual magnificence simply bursts into the world. So we've seen, recorded from our past, attempts by individuals and organizations and countries to make everybody over in their own image. From the earliest warring conflicts right down to as recently as last week, these have been attacks on people and on nations who are, quote, different than those who believe they cannot survive without diversity. And yet, diversity always survives, doesn't it? Could it be that the acts of creation, which after all created diversity to begin with, are not only universal, but they're eternal? It would appear that diversity is meant to be a part of our human experience because it's always with us. There's a quote from a song. I'm sure you'll recognize it, and probably the composer. When will they ever learn? That seems so appropriate here. As you celebrate and revere your own individuality and diversity, always hold in your heart and in your prayer treatment work those who fear that it will be delivered from or through that fear and somehow be able to exist beyond the loving and peaceful consciousness of those around them. Hold in your heart and in your prayer treatment, your spiritual practices, that humankind continues to become more aware that our individuality and our diversity is what expands the richness and the productivity of our lives and the lives of those around us. So why take on someone else's individuality when you have one of your own to revel in and to enjoy? You need not mold your life like someone else's. Trust yourself. Believe in your direct relationship with life. You'll never be disappointed. But don't wait. Today is the time. Right where you are is the place. And why expect everybody else to be exactly as we are? That's not individuality. If everyone was just like you, you wouldn't be you anymore, would you? So let's affirm for ourselves and for everyone. We release concerns about what has happened in the past. We know that today, every day, everything is made new. We let go of any sense of limitation or restriction. We are whole and complete individuals. We accept harmony, peace, happiness for ourselves. We honor the wholeness and the completeness of every individual. We accept harmony, happiness, and peace for everyone. And so it is.
Amen.